I'm a cancer survivor and I have an acute understanding that each day is precious.
Mhm.
And because of the way that I've had to survive cancer and care for my health every single day, I have a sense of purpose that is on steroids.
Yeah.
And it makes me fearless, especially when it comes to advocating for children. So I was not
Mhm.
going to back down, and I did not care that I was very unpopular at my daughter's school.
The content presented in this podcast and YouTube show is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the guidance of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your health or a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard or seen on this show. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The host, guests, and producers of this show are not responsible for any adverse effects resulting from your use of or reliance on any information presented.
Andrea, Andrea, can you hear us?
Many years ago, I died for 26 seconds. There are so many people in this world that have experienced life events that have led to their soul purpose. Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea will bring you these significant life events that demonstrate how to use those moments for guidance and life purpose. These are our stories.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Wake Up Your Soul. Today's guest is Jessica Reid Sliwerski, and we're going to talk about how she founded her company, Ignite Reading. Let's welcome Jess. Here she is. Hi,
Hi, Andrea.
how are you?
I'm well. I'm super excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here because, as I was telling you, I used to be a teacher and I have such a love for helping children. So I'm also very passionate about what you're doing. But let's talk about I don't know, I almost want to say like unfortunate but fortunate journey that led you here. So you were a teacher, and then what happened that led you into this?
Oh my goodness. So many things.
Yeah.
I think the universe had a plan, but of course, as all the things were happening, I didn't know that that was the plan. I just had to trust that somehow all of the experiences would come together to turn into something beautiful and magical.
Hmm.
So, my story starts about 20 years ago when I first stepped into the classroom and I did not know how to teach my kids to read, but I was teaching fifth graders in the Bronx in New York City, and many of them did not know how to read. And I went my whole first 2 years of teaching trying to figure out how to help them learn to read, asking for help, asking anyone and everyone who would listen, what do I do to teach my kids to read? And they would throw different resources at me, but none of them were rooted in the science of reading. And I remember trying those things and it felt like hitting my head against a brick wall because nothing was working and my kids weren't learning to read. So I went that whole first 2 years of teaching desperately wanting to help my kids learn to read and not knowing how.
Hmm.
In my third year of teaching, I went to a school in Harlem. I became a first grade teacher. And when you go from fifth grade to first grade, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
And I know you know because you taught kindergarten. I
Yeah.
mean, they are babies.
Yeah.
And one of the most incredible things happened at that school, which is that I learned how to teach kids to read. I was given an evidence-based curriculum. I was given ample professional learning and coaching upfront and throughout the school year. And we used data to drive instruction, and my babies learned to read.
Mhm.
And I absolutely fell in love with teaching reading. And I know you can relate
Yeah,
because you're also a reading teacher. There is this incredible emotional gratification that
that's true.
comes with working with children who go on this journey from not knowing how to read a single word to then being able to fluently read and comprehend paragraphs of text.
It changes their life, and it's so underestimated, I think, and parents they trust teachers, they do, and so many of them do not know what they're doing when it comes to teaching reading, and I'm, like, listening to you, and I'm thinking back because 'cause it's been a while for me,
Yeah.
but I'm thinking back to when I was doing the teaching credential program, and and granted, I still had a few courses left because I ended up not completing it because I was doing the classes simultaneously
Yeah.
while I was teaching,
Yeah.
and I made it through the majority. I finished out my kinder year teaching, but I was just like, This isn't for me," the being sick all the time and all that. But there really wasn't there were good things that we learned about teaching reading, but not really what I know now that I had to go out and figure out on my own. And I know now sorry, I'm running on my own tangent for a second, but I think it's important parents hear this. I know now from my own experience with my children and others, like I had a friend, this was not that long ago, I think it was last year, her daughter was struggling and she wasn't really reading. And so she was texting me about, I was like, okay, let me sit down with her and help her a little bit. And I did not help her long. It was probably a couple weeks. And she was like, she hasn't learned to read this well all year long. And as soon as they are getting that proper instruction, it can take off. And my oldest, I felt so bad and I still feel bad. Kinder's a very underestimated year as well. You know, people think like, "Oh, it's just kindergarten. They don't really need to go," or whatever, and I'm like,
It is the
"Actually,
foundation.
that is what I say." I'm like, "It is the foundational year. It is the most important year. It is the year that they learn phonics. It's the year that they even learn the foundation of math, all the things." And if you skip over that, they're going to have holes because, as you know, when you move forward into 1st, 2nd, 3rd, it's assumed that all these things were already taught or learned.
And then it just compounds.
It gets worse. Yeah.
And so you get it, this serotonin overflow that comes with teaching kids to read, and I was hooked. And what I also very quickly figured out, similar to your journey, was that yes, there is a science to how we teach kids to read, and it is not rocket science.
This is true. It's
And
not.
I was, on the one hand, overjoyed because I was finally teaching kids to read, and there was this part of me that was just like, "Oh my gosh, this is it. I never wanna do anything except be a first grade teacher and teach kids to read all day, every day." And then there was this other part of me that was so angry. I was angry that I had lost 2 years where I could have been helping kids. I was angry that I was realizing other kids in New York City where I was teaching, and then as I started learning about stories from other teachers in other places, they also didn't know how to teach reading, so other kids weren't learning how to read, and I set this intention in my heart at the time of wanting to help as many kids as possible learn to read. But I was still a baby teacher. I had no idea how I was going to do that. I just knew that something had been ignited in my soul.
Mhm.
Meanwhile, I'm a yes girl. I say yes to anything. I'm like, well, I've never done that before. Okay. So when you're a really good teacher, you get tapped for other opportunities. And I was very quickly tapped for school leadership. And from there, I moved into instructional coaching and was working with principals across New York City around literacy best practices. And from there, I accidentally co founded my first ed tech company with a literacy app I designed. And at that point, I was getting this taste of impact at scale, going
Mm,
from one classroom to a school, to a city, to states across the country, and what it meant to be able to help not just 25 to 30 kids in a
mhm,
classroom, but tens of thousands of kids across the country.
mhm,
And from there, I went on to become CEO of a national nonprofit that publishes high quality instructional materials. And I fell in love with one of the literacy curricula in our portfolio. And now here's where it gets interesting
mhm.
because I was also a parent by this time, and my daughter, Penelope, her nickname's Poppy, had started pre kindergarten at a public school in our neighborhood. And I was so excited because I'm like, I'm a former teacher. I'm going to rearrange my whole schedule and
Yeah,
I'm going to volunteer in her classroom. And this is going to be amazing. And she's in pre-K, which means, the most foundational of foundational parts of learning to read are going to be happening. And I was so excited.
yeah.
So her pre-K teacher welcomed me with open arms, was like, "Yes, I'm a brand new teacher.
Mm,
Come help me do all the things."
yeah,
So I start volunteering in her classroom. We're working on letter names, letter sounds with the kids. One of the first grade teachers in the building learns that I'm volunteering, learns about my background, asks me to help him. So I start working with him around teaching his kids to read.
mhm.
And here's where it gets crazy. I was then told by the school principal that I was not allowed to teach kids to read,
Mm,
and that if I wanted to volunteer, I had to teach the curriculum that the school was using, which at this point in time, back, several years ago, was a balanced literacy curriculum that was not rooted in the science of reading. And I said, I am not going to teach that. That is like literally harmful to kids and they need to be taught to read and we need to use a structured literacy approach rooted in
yeah.
evidence. So, I was kicked out of volunteering at my daughter's school. Now the
Mm,
thing about me is I am very stubborn.
same.
I also
But I love it when that happens, you're like, "Hmm, what do I have to push through to get what I want?"
right, right, like, okay, okay. I'm nice try, but I am not backing down because this is kids
Yeah.
and this is their education, this is their future. And at the same time, and this is where I think you'll also really understand intimately, I have this health history where I'm a cancer survivor and I have an acute understanding that each day is precious.
Mhm.
And because of the way that I've had to survive cancer and care for my health every single day, I have a sense of purpose that is on steroids.
Yeah.
And it makes me fearless, especially when it comes to advocating for children. So I was not
Mhm.
going to back down, and I did not care that I was very unpopular at my daughter's school.
Oh, man.
So I end up getting a new volunteering gig at another elementary school in another part of the community
Oh, no.
where the school only had 2% literacy proficiency. And the
Oh, wow.
subtext was,
Mhm.
okay, troublemaker, you want to volunteer? Go volunteer here.
Hmm.
Go volunteer where nobody's going to care
Yeah.
and where you can try and teach your heart out, but it's only 2% literacy proficiency, so you're probably not gonna do anything.
Yeah. But
And
no.
started working with a first grade teacher there, and in a very short period of time, I'm talking 6 weeks, we had our first data set showing that her babies were learning to read.
Mhm.
They were on a trajectory to end 1st grade, the majority of the kids in her class reading on benchmark. Again, in
Yeah.
a school with only 2% literacy proficiency. So what does that tell us? The problem is not the kids, the
Right.
problem is not their families, the problem is a
Program.
system that is not giving children access to the instruction they need to learn to read on time. And then the pandemic hits. And we thought we were packing the kids up for an extended spring break, but they never came back that school year.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And I was like a dog with a bone, obsessing about how close we had been to making sure they learned to read on time. And then we lost them. And
Mhm.
meanwhile, the entire education landscape shifts and kids are learning on Zoom. And I'm watching my own daughter attend pre-K on Zoom. And I'm like,
We're wasting our time.
this is this is a dumpster fire.
Yeah.
And there's something utterly fascinating about this. And it's like an opportunity that could be harnessed.
Mhm.
And then I'm coaching this teacher still as she's transitioning to teach on Zoom. And she's like, "What do I do?" And I said, "You do exactly what we were doing in the classroom, but we're going to adapt it for a virtual context." And sure enough, she starts teaching this way. It's now fall of 2020. Everybody is in Zoom school, but her kids are learning to read on Zoom. And that's when I was like, there's a model here.
Yeah.
There is a model. What could it look like to clone this teacher, create a national core of highly trained, highly accountable reading instructors who meet with kids virtually, one on one, and teach them to read. And then we embed during the school day as that foundational reading skills safety net. So if you're a classroom teacher, you and I were both classroom teachers. We know there are so many diverse needs
Mm.
across our classroom. Kids come in at all different points on that continuum of learning to read, and one single human, no matter how hard we work, no matter how big our hearts are, we cannot reach all of their individual needs. So I wanted to augment and amplify the power of that teacher by bringing in a virtual team of highly trained instructors who essentially works shoulder to shoulder with that teacher,
Mhm.
make sure all kids have the chance to learn to read on time. And I agree with you. Kindergarten is absolutely foundational. And then first grade is that next grade right on top of kindergarten, where we have a powerful opportunity to provide a just in time intervention
Mhm.
so that every other opportunity in school and life is available to our kids. They
Yeah.
must be fluent automatic readers before they leave first grade.
Yeah. And if they're not, they get to keep going, and that's the unfortunate thing, but I have to tell you briefly what happened with my daughter. It was crazy, and I still think about it to this day, and I still think about reaching out to the school district or the principal or somebody saying, "Hey," because I found out the teacher is still there, and saying, "Hey, can I come in and help?" But I don't know that she would want it. So it was, school starts in August, right? I mean, I think most schools start in August. So it started in August. We got all the way to February of kinder, and she didn't know all the letters in the alphabet. And granted, okay, you're probably thinking, "Well, you're a teacher, you should have been on it," but it's like, I shouldn't have to. I shouldn't have to do double duty, and I didn't want my kid to go be at school all day. I also think it's too long of a day for kids that age, but that's neither here nor there. But anyway, I'm thinking, she's been at school all day, she's exhausted, she shouldn't have to come home and do more work. It should get done in the classroom. And so February rolls around and a couple things hit me where it's like, okay, my husband's legally blind. Maybe something is wrong with her vision. And then I also started asking her questions. I said, "Well, I mean, you do the alphabet every day, right?" And she's like, "No, we don't do the alphabet every day." And I said, "What? No, no way." And this coincided with when I was sitting down with the teacher for a conference anyway. So I went in for the conference and I said, I said, "Kinley told me that you guys don't do the alphabet every day." But I told her, "Surely that's not true." And she goes, "Oh, no, she's not lying. She's telling the truth. We don't do the alphabet every day." I was like, "Oh." And I'm thinking, then how in the world do you expect her to be able to read or remember the letters and the sounds if you are not going over this every single day? Because if you're not doing it every day and you're doing it a couple days a week, whatever it be, odds are you're also doing it for a very short period of time. So, what is she getting 10 minutes of the alphabet? Maybe a week? Out of how many hours? Like, are you crazy? It just
Oh my
blew my
okay,
mind. It blew
okay,
my mind.
okay.
How is that not, like, number 1 basic
Yeah, so
kinder
let's talk about this. Let's
ah,
oh, I am I am with you. So, one of the first things I saw happening in Poppy's pre-K classroom was that they did not do the alphabet every single day. They did 1 letter a week.
yeah, that's a thing,
Letter a
yeah.
week, all by itself, out of context, 1 letter. And I'm like, "These babies' brains are ripe
Yeah,
to dump as much content as possible. We should be singing and saying the alphabet every day. We should be learning multiple letter names and sounds, uppercase and lowercase, doing as many read alouds as possible, as many poems as possible, as much rich language and vocabulary development as possible."
mhm,
And what so many parents don't know, and even educators don't know, is that kindergarten is when kids absolutely must learn all letter names, all letter sounds, uppercase and lowercase letters, how to track text left to right, not read text necessarily, but track it left to right, how to hold a book. By the time they leave kindergarten, you want them to have anywhere from 10 to 20 high frequency words that they have mapped, right? So words like the, and, of, I, is,
is
right?
yeah,
And they should also, at a minimum, be able to read simple words like cat,
yeah,
sit,
dog,
mug, hut,
yeah,
right? Such that they could read a very simple sentence:
yeah,
I see the cat.
mhm,
But parents don't know this. And if you are a baby teacher like you and I were once upon a time, where we didn't necessarily get this training in our teacher prep programs, we weren't necessarily in school systems where we were trained on how to do this,
yeah,
right? There's just a complete dearth of knowledge about what actually needs to happen and the urgency that it
yeah.
has to happen with.
I can say the one thing that I learned that I did not learn in school that I told you I went to Linda Bell, the processing
Yeah.
center. I love them. And what I learned there, I also dabbled in, and I still use it actually. I love the Susan Barton reading program, is great. But anyway, the thing that I learned and realized that the majority of teachers don't seem to recognize, or some of them will say they know, but they don't do it and they don't hear themselves, is understanding the sound that letters actually make. So many people put that UH on the end of a letter,
Well,
like B, it's buh. It's not
well,
buh because you're saying
is
BUH.
they
Buh.
still
It's just
yeah,
a buh.
they'll say
It's just a
"ka"
yeah.
instead of
Yeah, and I always say, how hard would it be to figure out how to write the word cat? If you think C is "ka," you're going "ka," like,
Yeah.
It won't make any sense in your brain, and that is a real struggle. So, just having teachers understand the actual sound that goes with a letter would be huge, but doing it daily, and we did that song, "What Does the Fox Say?" The kids
Uh-huh.
loved it, and there's a song that goes to the alphabet, but it's that same, "What do the letters say?" And
Mhm.
it was that, and every single day, the kids loved it. They would stand up and jump around and get wiggles out, but they would all sing it and watch it on the screen. I would put it up. I mean, I don't love having too much technology, but I mean, I did pretty minimal actually, but I would put that on the screen. It got their attention. The letter would flash up there. They would say the sound, the letter name. I
Mhm.
believe that song it's been a while, but I'm near certain it's upper and lowercase.
Mhm.
And it was great. And then we did it
Yeah.
every
Yes.
single day.
Yes. And I am very empathetic to how hard it is to be a teacher
Mhm.
because I've lived that experience. And I was lucky that in that 3rd year of teaching, I was in a school where we were using an evidence-based curriculum. We were using Success for All out of Johns Hopkins University. There was tons of coaching. So I got trained and coached on proper phoneme pronunciation. I learned not to make that schwa sound
Yeah.
when I was making a letter sound and modeling that for my kids.
Mhm.
But that's because there was instructional leadership that understood our teachers have to be intensively coached around this, and this is the most
Yeah.
important thing. And we must prioritize this because if we don't get this right, we're not going to get a whole lot of other things right in our school ecosystem.
Right.
Literacy is the spine. And what is really hard is that that instructional leadership does not exist everywhere.
Mm-mm.
And teachers are beholden to that instructional leadership, right? So
Mhm.
teachers are like one of the last stops downstream before the kids.
Mhm.
And if they're not coached and explicitly taught how to do this, whether it's through their graduate programs, their undergrad programs, or once they are in the classroom, then no, the likelihood that they're going to know how to do it is small. And
Mhm.
teaching reading, as we both agreed, it's not rocket science.
No.
However, it is a science. So when I was building Ignite Reading, one of the things that I was most maniacal about that I continue to sweat the details around is the way in which we're developing our tutors.
Mhm.
So they are getting this intensive professional learning and practicum experience, almost 100 hours before they are fully certified to teach kids to read.
Mhm.
And that includes phoneme pronunciation and even performance assessments around that phoneme pronunciation because it matters that
Mhm.
much. So, for the parents who are listening, for the educators who are listening, you can find videos on YouTube that very quickly show you how to pronounce each letter sound
Mhm.
and how to do it correctly. And that little thing can go such a long way in teaching kids to read.
The other piece too that I think is missing in the classroom for sure is the processing of reading and that visual processing that you need to have happening in your brain. Like my daughter the other day, she was memorizing a poem and she's doing well with it. And "But," and there were parts she was kind of trying to remember it. And I was like, well, I said, while you're saying this, you're seeing it in your head too, right? Like there's a movie playing in there, isn't there? And she's like, no, I just see the words. And I was like, oh no. I was like, okay. I was like, well, that's not good. I'm like,
Mhm.
we got to work on that, which we've talked about it before. And I was like, remember the book? And she went and busted out the book real quick. And she's like, this book. She's like, I can do it. And I'm like, yeah, you can, but we got to learn how to apply it to the things that we're reading. And that is something I think that gets skipped over is making that movie in your mind when you're reading and attaching an
Mhm.
image to the word because a lot of times kids just aren't doing that part. They're just reading the words and they're not making any visuals in their head. And then comprehension later is a huge struggle. And then your academics just fall to crap, really, when you're older because you don't get all the little picture books anymore.
Yeah, yeah. So this is yet again a nuance of learning to read. And when we think about there's these like two sides, right? There's the actual act of decoding the words on the page so that you can fluently read the text. And that is one important piece. And we want to get kids to the point where they can read with that automaticity and fluency, and they're not spending all of that working memory on trying to figure out how to read the words, but instead can free their working memory up to really thinking about what do these words mean? What is this text
Mhm.
saying? What is this story about? And that decoding is the first place, which then creates that bridge of fluency to comprehension. And that rich work of comprehension is so important in and of itself, right? And and yet again, going back to the foundations, we have to make sure kids learn to read, and then the comprehension piece is further supported by rich conversation, lots of poems, lots of vocabulary work, lots of read alouds, lots of just being out in the world and talking to kids about everything that they are seeing and reading more and more and more books with them. I was telling somebody yesterday this story from this weekend where we play lots of word games in our house. We're big word nerds. We like Wordle, we like Scrabble, we like Boggle. So Poppy and I are playing Boggle the other night, and she's reading the words that she got, and she says, "Hue." And I go, "I already got hue." And she goes, "Not Hue, hue, Hew, hue." And I look at her and I go, "That's not even a word." She goes, "Yeah, it is. Look it up. It means chop, like chopping wood."
Huh. I
And
actually
I'm
didn't know that.
like,
Is that
"W"
true?
She's 11 years old. She knows this word because she learned to read on time and because she is an avid reader who is constantly reading and reading and reading and building her knowledge.
Mhm.
So she's got this rich vocabulary, but it all stemmed from learning to read on time. And when you learn to read on time and you're also in a home where no, you don't get to play on an iPad and no,
Yeah.
you don't get to watch television. So you get to play in your imagination, play outside or read books. Like she has amassed this incredible vocabulary and knowledge, which then feeds itself
Mm,
in terms of her ability to comprehend and to make these mind movies. You can make a mind movie when you can truly comprehend what you're reading.
mhm. Yeah, absolutely. That's really funny. I didn't know that was a word either, so thank you.
I know,
Happy
right? I'm like, "Oh my goodness."
That's funny. I
Yeah, it is. Look it up.
Yeah. It's a miracle she can even read if her mom
I've
doesn't even know
created a
that.
monster.
So, Jess, okay, let's go back into your story. So, how old were you when you got cancer?
I was 33. I had just turned 33.
Okay.
I had just become a mom. So
Okay.
Penelope was born in November, and I turned 33 in January. And in March, I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Okay. And then how far were you into the teaching? Were you doing Ignite reading at that point?
No, no.
Okay. Yeah.
The night reading is I've been working on for the
Uh-huh.
past 5 years, building Ignite Reading. At the time that I was diagnosed, I was at my first ed tech company that I co-founded,
Okay.
where I was overseeing product and I was chief academic officer, and I joked that that was my first baby, bringing that product to life, and then Penelope was my second child.
Okay. So Ignite Reading, when did you launch that?
So I began building it in the summer of 2021. We ran our very first pilot
Mhm.
and have been continuing to build it since. So I've been at this for 5 years,
Mhm.
but I initially was incubating it inside of the nonprofit I was running,
Mhm.
Open Up Resources. And then as it started to take on a life of its own, I was like, okay, this has got to spin out and be
Yeah.
its own thing. So we spun it out as a public benefit corporation, and it's been officially its own company for about 3.5 years.
Okay. Can you explain the program a little bit more?
Yeah.
Like, so you said it's one-on-one and you said teachers can use it, but is it for parents as well? Is it a home program?
So we're not
Mm.
yet in the direct to parent market. It is
Okay.
something that intrigues me and something I think about because
Yeah.
I think parents have so much power in their voice
Mhm.
and the power to catalyze school systems to do more and do better for
Mhm.
kids. And so much of this science of reading movement has been catalyzed by parents because they watched during the pandemic their kids on Zoom and saw that they weren't being taught to read.
Yeah.
And so there is something really interesting to me about the untapped potential in unlocking parents as activists for their own children, but the ripple effect that has for all children.
Mhm.
Nonetheless, we started in K-12 explicitly. We partner with states and school districts, and then we bring the program into the school system. It is virtual. It
Okay.
is one-on-one. What it looks like is I'm a classroom teacher. I deliver my whole class lesson for the day. And then there's that chunk of time right after delivering the lesson where typically kids are doing independent reading and a teacher might be pulling some small groups.
Mhm.
That's usually where we embed. And
Mm.
the kids who are getting the Ignite reading intervention, they're grabbing their devices, they're putting on their headphones, they're clicking a button. On the other side of the screen is a live human, just like you and I are talking on a screen.
Okay.
They meet with their tutor at the same time every day. So you could walk into a classroom, you might see a teacher in the corner working with a small group doing some fluency and comprehension work.
Mhm.
And then you see the rest of the kids one on one meeting with their tutor. And it's the same tutor every day that they're seeing for at least 75 minutes a week, one on one.
Okay.
And that tutor is teaching precisely into their gaps. We
Mhm.
do baseline diagnostics so we can understand, okay, Kinley knows these letters of the alphabet, but Kinley hasn't mastered these letters of the alphabet. So we're going to start her instruction there.
Mhm.
We're then doing a lot of daily formative assessment, data collection, so that each day the child is getting precise instruction tailored to their individual gaps in order to aggressively close those gaps and move them forward on that continuum of learning to read.
That's really great. Why is this not in more classrooms? How does the
Exactly. Why is it not in more that's what I'm working on.
how does the funding take place for this?
So it varies. It varies by district and it can vary by state. In some places, like the state of Massachusetts, there has actually been state level policy around this concept of a first grade safety net and high dosage, high impact tutoring like Ignite Reading
Mhm.
being the safety net. So in that case, the state unlocked funding so that we could do this kind of tutoring at scale for the
Mhm.
kids who are most at risk of falling through the cracks and not learning to read before they leave first grade. In other places, we are tapping into local budgets. They may be pulling from Title I funding, they may be pulling from special ed funding. Whatever pocket of their budget enables them to fund early literacy interventions,
Mhm.
they're pulling from that and then potentially braiding together other funding streams.
Okay. Yeah, something has to change. People wanna complain about the leadership of America or just their own job, right? Their boss, and it's like, well, we have to change the intelligence of our future generations in general, right? And we need to have people be very literate and able to read because when we can read, we can learn, and there's just, so much AI happening now where kids don't even really have to be able to read. They could just audio it into their phone, They can just talk to their phone and say, "Write me a blah, 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 blah," and they'll just copy and paste it. They don't even know what it says.
Mhm.
It's really scary what's going on in the world,
Yeah.
and this is definitely something that is needed and will always be needed. We will always need to know
Right,
how to read.
right. You can't do anything else in school or life if you do not learn to read. And if we did nothing else in school other than make sure all of our babies learn to read on time, and learn to read really well,
Yeah,
we would be setting them up to be successful in ways that we're not right
yeah.
now.
I
Because when
talk about this all the time.
math, you can do science, you can do social studies, you can access more knowledge and self-serve knowledge, right? You can become a critical thinker, you can become a citizen,
Mhm.
and we're depriving so many children of the right to learn to read, and then they don't just magically learn to read later. If you are not literate and on benchmark in reading at the end of 1st grade, you are still largely not on benchmark at the end of 4th grade, 8th grade, high school, and then we look at adult illiteracy rates, and it's absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah. Well, and then I think you can look at illiteracy rates and crime or just behavioral things that happen when they cannot read. And that's something I've talked about what you were saying. I talk about this a lot with people. I say math and reading are like the most important that they learn that foundation for. And math, I do believe a lot of it you could gain at further points in your life. But if you do not know how to read and read well, you're going to struggle forever. And I say, science, whatever, history, whatever. My kid can go and learn science and history at 20 years old. They can pick that up then. It will be easy, right? As long as you can read. So if you skipped a science lesson or you skipped a history lesson when you were younger, I mean, science, it does build a little bit, right? But history, especially, is something where I'm like, I don't really care too much if my kid's missing a history lesson because she certainly can go read all about it when she's 20, 30, 40, at whatever age and take it in and understand what she needed to learn when she was 8, 10, 12, whatever age it was. But without reading, none of that will happen. And so I think, like we were saying, it's just kinder, 1st grade, those first few years, it's so, so, so important that they build that foundation.
Yes,
Mhm. Yeah.
agreed.
Yeah. So, Jess, what is your mission right now? Is it just getting it into more schools, or are you working on trying to make this an at-home product?
Yeah. So, right now, our biggest focus is around what we call a first grade promise. And it is working to catalyze school systems to do everything possible to make sure that their kids are learning to read on time, which is before the end of first grade.
Mhm,
And we're talking with state leaders, district leaders, school leaders, teachers around this vision of what would it take to get at least 85% of your first graders on benchmark before the end of first grade. And it can't just be our intervention, right? We're the safety net. You can't use an emergency room to solve the healthcare crisis. Instead, it's this idea of teachers need curriculum that's efficacious. Teachers need coaching and professional learning. You've got to have sound assessment practices happening. And even when you have those things in place, which are essential, they are not going to get all of your kids across the finish line. So you must also have tutoring as part of your literacy ecosystem. And we are that partner that can help you ensure that no kids are going to fall through the cracks.
Mhm.
And there's this rhetoric nationally around read by grade 3. And the reason that that's in the water is because 3rd grade is when accountability measures like state tests happen. But a state test is a comprehension test. And all of the leading indicators show coming up to 3rd grade that our kids are not going to pass that test. We've got so many school systems that do screeners for kids showing how many of them are at risk of not learning to read. And then by the end of the school year, the screeners show that the kids have barely moved. And then we wonder why our 3rd grade reading scores are awful or why our 4th grade NAEP data is abysmal, but all the signs are there. And so we need to back the train up. We have to have urgent focus around 1st grade. And what we're focused on the most at Ignite Reading right now is making sure that policymakers, school system leaders, state leaders understand that kids have to learn to read in 1st grade and that 3rd grade is too late.
Mhm.
And as we're working on this, my hope is that we can catalyze more school systems and states to action so that more kids do learn to read in 1st grade. And we have been predominantly focused on school systems because it's where the majority of kids are every single day. And we want to help as many kids as possible.
Mhm.
So the parent piece is not something we have explicitly leaned into building.
Yeah.
And I have parents reaching out to me on a near daily basis
I'm sure.
saying, "Can you help my child?"
Yeah.
And it's really hard for me as a parent myself and as a lifelong educator to say, "We're not serving
Not
the
yet.
rest of parents. Go to your school board, tell your school board you need this program because you are one voice." But data shows there are hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of kids in your school system who also need this.
Do you give parents any tips or ways that they can work with their kid at home? Like, okay, if you cannot get the school to take on this program, this is what I'd recommend you do.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, I don't think it's realistic to expect every parent to become a highly
Okay.
skilled reading teacher like you and I, right?
Yeah.
I mean, look, we both know how to teach our kids to read and while also trying to, be working mothers, we can't even fully lean in on our own kids.
Mhm.
And so the number one thing that I say to parents is read to your children.
Mm.
It is a small thing that can go a very long way. And read to them as early as possible. I know this sounds nuts, but I started reading to Penelope when she was still a baby in my belly. And then once she was born, every single night we were reading books. During the day, we were reading books. Caregivers were reading books to her. We live in a home where we are surrounded by books, but also we would go to the library and we would get even more books. So reading is something that is just part of the fabric of our lives every single day. And that communicates that reading is pleasurable, reading is important, reading is something we do here, it's something we value. So that is the lowest lift, most important thing that parents can do.
Mhm.
And then it's what you and I talked about when your child is in kindergarten. And even before that, right? Ideally, before they even start kindergarten, they have learned letter names and letter sounds. And if not all of them, a chunk of them.
Mhm.
In kindergarten, They need to master letter names and sounds. They need to be able to read simple consonant, vowel, consonant words. They need a repository of anywhere from 10 to 20 high frequency words. And they need to know things about how to hold a book, right? And ideally can read simple sentences. And if your child is in kindergarten and you observe that they cannot do those things, you need to be as loud and obnoxious as possible with their school system about what they are going to do to make that happen for your child.
Yeah.
And in doing that, you're not just advocating for your child, you are helping all of the other children who don't have their own voices yet, right? But whose families may not be aware of the problem that's affecting them as well. And then in first grade, you should see over the course of the year in first grade that they are able to read increasingly complex text and that they are not reliant on the pictures in order to read the words on the page. And so
Mhm.
by the end of first grade, what you would hope to be seeing is that they can sit and they can read with you with a little bit of support books like Magic Treehouse, for example, right? And if they're not on that continuum, they're not tracking towards that, you should be worried and you should be advocating.
Yeah.
Now, here's where it gets tricky, and this is where my heart hurts, is that if you're advocating and it's not getting better and you have the resources, get them a tutor because you cannot risk that they're not going to learn to read on time. And so, again, that's where I think a lot about what opportunities could there be for a program like Ignite Reading to also provide that support outside of the school day at home.
Mhm.
Rome wasn't built in a day,
Yeah.
and we've got our hands full right now with the millions of kids who are in public schools.
Yeah. I know. I think about it too, even though I've been doing the whole podcasting thing, but it seems like it keeps coming up in my life with just friends
Yeah.
and other kids just struggling with reading. I'm like, okay, maybe there's something I need to do about this. And like you said, it's not rocket science, but it does seem to be this like secretive knowledge that not everybody has for whatever reason. And, when it comes to parents, it's like, I wanna say, "Yeah, just do it yourself," but then I'm like, "Well, there's a lot to it, though. There's a lot of stuff you
Mhm.
have to have the time as a parent to dive in and learn all the bits and pieces to it. It doesn't mean you can't help them to a degree, but yeah, I always point people to the Susan Barton reading program for a parent to do at home by themselves. It's very, very simple and very straightforward.
Yes.
What?
Yes. Or yeah, I agree with you. Or like, I know this sounds cheesy and I'm dating myself here, but like Hooked on Phonics,
Yeah.
right? Or the Bob books that you can often find at Costco, for
Yeah.
example.
I mean, Susan Barton's an old program too, but like, if you watch her videos, you'll know. But she takes the Hooked on Phonics, I think, to another level and just having that she brings in the visual processing because she you have and the touch because she has the little tiles, they're colored tiles that the kids have to use
Yeah.
and manipulate and attach the sound, and it's a really, really great program, and I used it when I had kinder, but I wasn't gonna buy on my own all the little colored tiles, these little wooden tiles, so I just
Yeah.
used colored paper. I mean, there's ways
Yeah.
to still get by, so I just used colored construction paper for my kids. But I do remember it was kind of sad. I had there's 5 days a week, and I had my high readers and my low readers, and so depending on how well you could read,
Yeah.
you weren't gonna see me every day if you were a strong reader, and it doesn't
And
mean
then
that they
your
didn't.
needs aren't met
Yeah.
as a strong reader, right?
Yeah, they still
To
needed stuff.
further push you with your own fluency and comprehension development.
Yeah, it was unfortunate, but then I think I can see parents maybe and I'm not accusing any parent of this, but I could see where a parent could feel, like, happy about that, like, "Oh, my kid only has to sit with you twice a week, that must mean they're just so smart and they're doing so great," and it's like, that's probably what we're supposed to lead you to believe, but really, that means 3 days a week, your kid could be gaining even more knowledge.
Right. Right. Schools have these blocks where ideally they are differentiating instruction, but it is so hard for an individual teacher to differentiate for all kids. So one of the things we hear from our partners and I see when I go into schools is this is a model that sets up every child to win,
Mhm.
because then the kids who are fine can get the attention they need and deserve also from the teacher, because the kids who are more at risk are getting that daily one-on-one instruction every day. And now the teacher can also lean into moving the other kids as well and meeting their needs.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I love what you're doing, so keep doing it,
Thank
and
you.
the kids definitely need it. Jess, where can people look into I'll put the if you send me a link,
Okay,
I can put it into the episode so that educators or schools can look into it,
great.
but where can people find more information about the program?
Yeah, so you can learn more at ignite-reading.com. And then you can also find me on LinkedIn at Jessica Reid, Reid, Sliwerski, phonetic, Sliwerski, and also on Instagram at Jess Ignites.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here and sharing all of this. This is very
Oh,
valuable. Yeah.
thank you. So awesome to get to chat with you, and I'm
Yeah.
so grateful for you.
Thank you.